Hello world, my name is Klaus Hostel and I'm doing 100 innovation keynotes in 100 days. Today is number 49 and today's keynote is a little bit different. It's titled 49 Cool Things You Can Learn from Lars Andresen. Now why is that? Well, here's the thing, this is Lars. Many of you don't know him, but you should. Lars turns 50 today. Big celebration. And that means, by my account, that Lars was 49 at some point during the day because he's turning 50 today. This is, of course, just an excuse because it means that I can make this video about Lars and for Lars on his 50th birthday. It also means that I should tell you one of the reasons I'm doing this is because Lars is one of my inspirations. He may not always be aware of this, but he's one of the guys who really inspires me and who I look up to as a human being. So with no further ado, I'm going to launch into 49 things that you can learn from this extraordinary human being. The first of which is that everyone loves lists. Lars works in publishing and has done so for many, many years. He's been an editor-in-chief at his company, a publishing house, for I think 17 years or so. And one thing he told me many years ago, we've been friends for about 10 years or so, he said, Klaus, everyone loves lists. Lists work. There's something about them that we enjoy. And he posts lists often on his own, on social media. There'll be like 10 things I like about this TV series or 8 reflections while driving to work one morning, that sort of thing. We gobble it up. Everybody loves lists. Number 2, you never know where a joke will tell you. Lars is named, his real name is Lars Andresen, but where does the chaos come from? Well, many, many years ago, I think about 30 years ago or so, Lars and a friend signed up for this conference, or I think it was like a convention, something like that, and they were asked to put in their names, and as some sort of joke, I don't know why, he told me once, but I forget why, they signed up as like Lars Andresen, and the other guy was like something, I think his name was Olav, but I'm not sure, it was like Law something something, so they thought they were being really funny and kind of young guys, and the name has stuck with them. So a random joke in a sign-up form 30 years ago has stuck with him. And to me, of course he's Lars, but he's also Lars Chaos. And while there's a lot of kind of what's behind that name, let's not get into that too much, but it's fitting and it's fun. So, lesson number 2, you never know where a joke may take you. Number 3, you should never be afraid to show the world what you love. Whether it's your passion for role-playing, whether it's your cats, whether it's a hobby of some sort, it's gardening, I don't care what it is, you should never be afraid of showing the world what you love, and Lars does this excellently. The amount of pictures of his cats that we see, stories about them, the amount of passion that he's put into his role-playing, I'm not going to call it a career because for most of his life it hasn't been, but his role-playing passion is immense and he's never afraid to show that to the world. And it's inspiring and it's empowering. You should always dress stylishly. Now, unlike me, Lars is a snappy dresser. You will never see him anywhere without looking absolutely amazing. And the difference between Lars's best and his even better is, well, let's just say that he always sets a high bottom line, and then sometimes he breaks that record himself. So always dress stylishly, and when you can, extra stylishly. Number 5, make sure you know people in many age brackets. There was a conversation he and I had some years back where he said, Klaus, at some point I felt that I was getting older. And since he's turning 50 now, he's obviously not 20 anymore, which is completely fair. And he said, I felt I needed to get to know some younger people. He said, one of the nicest things about being part of the role-playing community is you have a friend who's 2 years younger than you. And then that friend has a friend who's 3 years younger. And that friend has somebody who's 4 years younger. And that, etc. And suddenly you're in a bar talking with somebody half your age about something you're both passionate about, and none of you care about age. That stuck with me. Thank you for that insight, Lars. And I've been lucky enough to be part of some of the same communities and to have my friends who are half my age and friends who are quite a bit more than, I'm close to half their age. Still, this is something I hold true as well, but Lars has really kind of nailed it for me, that you should make sure you know people in many age brackets. 6, you should take your passion seriously and you should not be ashamed of them. It doesn't matter what your passion is. Do you collect Stormtrooper armor? Do you like My Little Pony? Are you serious about football? I don't care what it is. You should take your passion seriously and you shouldn't be ashamed. This is something that Lars exemplifies to a amazing level. Number 7, you should be generous, even when you think it might be smarter not to. There's a lovely story, and I got this quite some time ago. I was interviewing Lars for a magazine that I was running at the time. Later, he helped me run it, but that's further down the list. And Lars said he'd gotten a call from a Danish TV production company, and they wanted to hear who were the best role-playing people in the country. And Lars gave them a couple of names, and then the woman on the other end of the call laughs and says, so I think, and I can't remember the price details, but I think he was like number 7 they'd called, and the ones before him had all said, me, I'm the best, I'm the best, I'm the best. And Lars was the first on their list to actually give them names that weren't his own name. He could have said me. He could have, not me, Klaus, but me, Lars. He could have said, because he was at the time. And it would have been fitting, but he felt if they were looking for recommendations, it wouldn't really be smart or nice to say me. And apparently all the others had done that. And he ended up being one of the people getting the job. Number 8, if you happen to have a weird friend once, tell cool stories. And this ties nicely into number 9. Who wouldn't want to hear about Demon Bjark? And Demon Bjark is this mythical creature from Lars's past. He worked with him on several occasions. They had absurd adventures together. And the amount of stories that I've heard Lars tell about Demon Bjark, both in the flesh and on social media, let's just say it's not a low number. And they're all intriguing. They're all wonderful. And at the time, I guess, it was just Lars's friend Bjarke, who, for reasons we shall not go into here, was named Demon Bjarke. And who doesn't want to hear stories about Demon Bjarke? I can't imagine people who wouldn't want to hear that. And no, for those of you who are far from Danish sensibilities, this guy was not an actual demon. He was called Demon Bjarke because he, from the story at least, was slightly crazy, but in a fun way. But he was not an actual demon. Not that sort of thing. Number 10. You're never too old to try out new things. I remember the first time Lars came with us to a live-action role-play event. Lars has been a role player for all of his life, or at least for a huge part of his life, but he'd never really gone seriously into one of these high-end live-action role-playing things, which is where I came from. And he went to one, and he said he was scared as shit, and he felt that he was completely out of his depth, but he wanted to do it. And that was, was it 7, 8 years ago, something like that? That means that the age I am now, I'm turning 42 this year, was what Lars was then. And he just jumped into it. Very, very inspiring. Number 11, if you have principles, make sure people know. There was one of Lars's parties that I was invited to, and I wrote him I was going to be late for the party, and I thought it's no big deal, it's a big party, it's not going to matter, but I just wrote as a courtesy and said, hey Lars, I'm going to be hitting your party like 2 hours after it started, I hope that's not a problem. And he wrote, yeah, it is. At my parties, people are there on time, or they're not there at all. So you need to decide. And I can't remember if I got one of those rare dispensation deals from him, or if I ended up not going to the party, or if I moved out around other stuff. I honestly can't remember. But I do remember him saying, yeah, you know what? This matters to me. So if you want to be there, here's my principles. Here's my rules. You can abide by them or you cannot. And both are equally okay. I won't judge you. I won't be mad. But this is how it works with me. And I love that. It's impractical sometimes because people have to remember all these things. But if you have principles, make sure people know them because they're not universal. We all have these strange ideas of how we think the world should be run. And one thing is getting mad or getting annoyed if people break those rules. But another is not even telling them first. And I love Lars for telling me straight out, here's what it is. Here's what I find important, and you can deal with it. Or you can deal with it. You can take it seriously, or you can stay away. And I love that. Number 12, you should help other people make shared dreams come alive. The magazine I mentioned earlier was a Danish national role-playing magazine, and we later did an international one. And in both of those, Lars was a key player part of the time, and he was helping behind the scenes, and very few people knew he was involved. He didn't care. He cared about the dream, and he said, I could run this. I would be better at running this. He would be. He worked professionally with magazines. I was just a lousy amateur. And so was our other editor-in-chief, Casper, for the other magazine. But he said, helping behind the scenes means that I don't have to do the thing to make it happen. I just have to help out, and that's much simpler. And I love that. Find somebody who's living your dream or trying to make it come true, a shared dream, and then help out. You don't have to lead. Helping out is sometimes a lot more rewarding and a lot easier. And that was a good lesson. Number 13, you should be honest with those who care about you. I've never experienced Lars being less than honest with people who care about him. People who don't care, it's a different matter. But people who care, and I'm on that list, I've never experienced him being dishonest. And I think that's an important thing to know, that it's so easy, so tempting to get caught up in trying to kind of keep those we like or those who like us from the truth. And I fall into that trap myself all the time. But this idea of being honest with the people who care, who can handle that, I think that's a good philosophy. Number 14, don't pretend you like everyone. Lars has also been a great example of this, saying straight out, you know what, I think that guy's an asshole. I don't like that woman. Yes, I'll be with a party with this guy, but I don't like him. I think, ew, I don't need him in my life. I accept him. He has a right to be there. But if it was up to me, we wouldn't cross paths at all. I like that. This idea that, oh, we like everybody. I love everyone. No, most of us are humans. We like some people, we love others, we dislike some people, we actively hate others. We should be honest about that. Not necessarily to their faces, because society needs to turn and the wheels need to be greased, but at least with ourselves. Number 15, sharing reflections from your life in a way that excites us. That's cool. I've read so many of Lars's social media posts where he writes about something small, but what gets me going has been the reflections. Not so much that it took him 42 minutes to get to work, or it took him 46 minutes the day before. That's not interesting. The facts are rarely interesting in themselves, but the reflections behind them, the thoughts on why this was and what could be different and why he made the choices he did. Lars has been a master at showing these things. And for a lot of us, if we share reflections on what's going on in our life, if we share the whys and the hows, not just the whats, then we'll find that people are much more interested. And speaking of that, my eyes running water and bugging me. Now that's a what, so why should you care, right? If I'd managed to make it interesting, talking about why that might be or what I could use it for, or I digress. Number 16, it's okay to get upset by something only a few people care about. I've seen Lars get incredibly mad about some small thing that 99.999% of the planet doesn't even know what is. But the truth is, as long as you know, and some people around you know and care, then that's fine. Just as you can get excited by somebody's birthday, even though that person is unknown to most of the world, to most of society, then it's okay to get upset by things that most people don't care about, yet alone know about. That's fine. And I think that's a good life lesson. Number 17, not everybody cares about details, but there are plenty who do. You may throw up something on a social media post, or you may write something in a blog, or however you get it out there, an article maybe. And yes, there are going to be plenty of people who don't care if it was an A or B or C, who don't care how you put together your LinkedIn messaging, or how you name your files, or what sort of software you use for your video broadcast. Sure, that's details, but there are always people who care, and it's never been easier to reach them. And the more detailed, sometimes the more we care. Number 18, there's no such thing as 100% proofread, but 4 times proofreading is a good standard. This is another thing I learned from Lars when we were doing magazines together, that I had so many people like, oh, look, Klaus, there's this book that's published, and there's a spelling mistake, and if you ever want to be a professional publisher, then you shouldn't have spelling mistakes in your books. Then I'd usually get huffy and puffy and show them like real books, professionally published books that were published in millions of copies and still had mistakes, and say, yeah, like this, you mean? Like the mistakes in this book or this magazine? And when I talked with with Lars about this, he just laughed and said, professionals in the real world know there's no such thing as 100% proofread. In the magazine world where he lived and where we both kind of played around together, he said 4 times proofreading, 4 independent proofreading rounds was a good standard. But even then, you knew you didn't catch everything. You would catch a lot of things, but not everything. And I like that, this idea that even though you try, you know that at some point it's enough is enough. And 100% is not enough in many cases, because it's not possible. Number 19, Lars Parties, spectacular, legendary. Hosting parties is an art form, and that's something that I've seen described, but with Lars, I've seen it firsthand. The seating, the food, the music, the tempo, the spatial design, the after party, the after party, the cleanup, the setup, all these sorts of things. I've never met anybody like Lars who does parties better. I've been at bigger parties, sure. I've sometimes been at better parties by random chance because things just organically evolve. But when it comes to kind of consistently hosting parties that are amazing, I don't know anyone who gets even close to Lars. So if you get a chance to be invited to one of his parties, do so. And even if you think, I'll never meet this guy, why do I care about that? Well, think about when you host a party. Think about how much energy you can put into one. Check out stuff on the web. There's so many guides and tips on how to do good parties. And hosting parties is more than just sending out invitations, if you want them to be really good. Number 20. Forgive when you can, but only if you mean it. I'm not going to go into detail with this one. I'm just going to say that this is a good reminder to all of us. Be forgiving, but only when you mean it. Fake forgiveness. It's going to eat you up inside. 21. Social media is great for when you want pics of something. I've rarely met people who are as good at Lars as saying, hey, I'd like pics of your children. Show me pictures of your children. Show me pictures of the board games you're playing. Show me pictures of your pets. Show me pictures of your offices, whatever it is. Lars will post about it. He'll say, okay, I want this and this is my reason. And people will flood him with replies. Yes, social media is great for showing off things to the world, but it's also amazing for saying, I'd like this. Put this into my feed. Help me with this. Because it requires so little effort and it's fun. And it's something that most of us are happy to do. Number 22, and I know this firsthand, your friends love it when you say nice things about them. Lars is an expert at saying nice things about his friends. Not always nice things. No. He's a real human being. But saying nice things about his friends in a kind of completely open, honest, just, hey, she's really good at this, or he did this amazing thing, or wow, I don't know anybody who handles that like him. Say nice things about your friends. They appreciate it. If they hear it, they appreciate it. If they hear it secondhand, third hand, they also appreciate it. And if you hear nice things about somebody else, well, that's also pretty nice, especially if you know them. Number 23, it's okay to be petty sometimes. Just stand by it. Now, jumping to the other end, one thing that I take from Lars is that sometimes he's petty as hell. Sometimes there's this small thing and he's like, like a small, like grinning goblin. But he says, I know I'm being petty. I'm reveling in it. And I know it and I accept it. It's not my nicest personality feature, but I accept it. And I live with it and I stand by it. And I think that's pretty refreshing. Instead of like, no, I'm never petty. Never petty. Not even a small petty bone. It's like this, we're all petty sometimes. But standing by it, being honest and saying, yeah, I have this thing, I'm petty, but I'm really, really happy that happened. I like that. I agree with it, of course. And I wouldn't say Lars taught me this, but he's definitely given me a good appreciation for how standing by your pettiness is better than trying to ignore it. Number 24, the right coworkers can make the shittiest job great. I know, even though I've only known Lars for 10 years, I know that many, many years ago he was a dishwasher. And he and some friends were dishwashers together. And the dishwashing stories were amazing because it was like high stress, high tempo, high exhaustion, bad pay, bad work hours. In many ways, it was a shitty place to work. But, and I think this was like 30, 35 years ago or so, but the stories that he tells from there and kind of the way his eyes light up when he tells about the dishwasher times, not because of the work, no, despite the work, but because of the people. Both the people he worked with who he liked and the people he worked with who he didn't like. The kind of the crazy chefs and the mad waiters and the annoying customers, all that sort of thing. Made for great stories and it obviously made for great experiences. So the right coworkers can make the shittiest job great. And right can mean many things. Number 25, we're halfway there. Being a man of refined taste is still sexy. There's that. Lars knows about stuff. He is a man of elegance and taste. And that, I don't know when that's going to go out of style. Number 26, it's good to have a guy for that, especially at work. The number of times I've heard Lars say, hey, I'll just call my friend Bjark, who's a coworker, I found out at some point, or I'll just call this guy, or I'll call that guy, or the guys here don't have to be guys, that's not the point. But having somebody to call who can fix that problem or can help you or can give you a little bit of sparring. Very, very useful because it allows you to cut through the clutter on a given problem, whether it's about layout or writing or relationships or where to buy the right suit or what should a diamond ring cost for a 40-year birthday. Should you even buy a diamond ring to somebody for a 40-year birthday? That sort of thing. And Lars has an amazing amount of guys for that. And that's impressive. Number 27, fashion consistency is a great way to be remembered. I can't remember when I've seen Lars without a vest. He'll wear suit jackets, he'll wear nice shirts, he'll wear hats, but he'll always wear vests. Lars and his vests are legendary. And it means that if you ask 100 friends about 100 dressers in the same, you ask 100 people who all know each other about how each of them dresses, most of them won't be able to say, they'll say, oh, Jonas is well dressed, and Nune sometimes has these nice, colorful, long dresses, and I think Sophie has a tendency to wear this kind of outdoorsy footwear, but a lot of it will be guesswork. But with Lars, almost all those people will say, Lars wears vests. Oh yeah, he has these nice vests. Because not only is it a good fashion choice, it's a consistent one. So if you want to be remembered, be consistent in your fashion choices. Number 28, we all love it when somebody rants about stuff online. I know nobody like Lars who will rant about something seemingly insignificant. Some young adult TV series that he didn't even want to watch, but now he's giving us 10 reasons for why he's choosing not to watch it. And they're funny, and they're biting, and they're ridiculous sometimes. But hearing other people rant is something that many of us enjoy, especially if they rant in a fun way. And Lars, he's a master ranter. 29, if you're truly interested, your friends want to share. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean by somebody coming and say, hey, Klaus, how are you? Okay. That's a polite greeting. Somebody says, how are you doing? I want to know. That's a lot better. And somebody's saying, so there's this thing in your life that I know matters a lot to you, and I don't understand it, but I want to. Can we talk about that? I'll sit down and open my heart to that person. The last time I saw Lars, he did exactly that. He said, next time we should set aside a whole day because I want to hear about this thing that happened in your life. I want to hear about how you deal with it. I want to hear about what your thoughts are. I want to hear about what you've learned. I want to hear about your emotions behind it. I want to hear the dark secrets. I want to hear the good stuff. And I want to carve out that day to spend with him talking about that thing because he was actually interested. He didn't just say, how are you? And then the moment I started answering, he was kind of looking away. No. Lars is an expert at being interested. And if you're actually interested and you ask for specifics, people will gladly tell you, they'll gladly share. But if you just say, how are you, and you're already moving on to the next sentence, then of course you're going to get fine or I'm good, so on as a reply. But if you're truly interested, your friends will want to share. Number 30, experimentation is more fun to do when you document. I've read bizarre Facebook posts by Lars on him trying out new ways to work. Not to work, but get to work. Him trying out different times because of different traffic patterns and different light patterns. Some of it has gotten really kind of long-haired and, not like me, but in metaphorical sense, long-haired and detailed and nerdy, to put it mildly. But it's also fun to read about. And I'm pretty sure that for Lars, experimenting, yes, that's fun. But documenting, sharing with somebody, that's also part of the fun. Because if it wasn't, why the hell would he go to such pains? But experimentation is more fun to do when you document. I'm pretty sure I can say that on Lars's behalf. Number 31, there are many ways of being one of the best in the world. Most of you probably don't know it, but Lars is one of the best in the world. He's one of the most award-winning role-playing authors in the world. And for most of you out there, you probably don't even know that every year at the Festival Gaming Convention, the Otto is handed out. The Otto is a prize for people who have done something inside that role-playing sphere. It's the closest thing the global role-playing community has to an Oscars. It's been there since 1992, I think 92 or 93. I even have one of them here. This is mine, Lifetime Achievement Award from 2015, when I got it, the Honorary Otto. Now, there's the Honorary Otto, which is the one I have. Of course, Lars won one a couple of years before me. But there's also the ones you get for actually writing role-playing scenarios. And he's got this whole row of them. If he's not the most award-winning author out there, he's one of the most ones. And you may never have heard of him, but this guy is seriously one of the best writers of interactive fiction on the planet, and has been at that league for the last 20 plus years. So when I say there are many ways of being one of the best in the world, I mean that. You may never have heard the guy's name, but when it comes to writing this sort of thing, I can name a few people who are more or less as equals on the planet. And then there's all the billions who are not. 32. Sometimes trivial stuff can be incredibly exciting. If you go into detail, usually you will lose some people, but if you go into enough detail, and I touched upon this a little bit earlier, if you go into enough detail, then suddenly it gets exciting. If you go into where exactly you put the shoe, or you place the camera, or what exactly you write, then it gets interesting. So there's a fine line between too much detail and getting it to the very, very trivial, the incredibly over-detailed. It's interesting. Lars is a master of taking that triviality and kind of raising it and making it something that is worth consuming, or worth at least paying attention to. Number 33, the year where you, as a hobbit in J.R.R. Tolkien's fictional world, become an adult. Numbers matter and are great alibis for action. I've seen Lars use numbers, odd, random numbers, and say, okay, there's this, and now we're doing it. The classic one is like, Lars is turning 50, so I'm using that as an alibi to give this talk. But there's so many numbers out there, and using them as alibis for whatever it is you want to do is a great skill. 34, an elegant man can easily pull off a hat. There's a duality to that. The first off is that if you've seen if you've seen Lars in a stylish hat, you'll know that if you are elegant to begin with, then putting on a dapper hat, it's just a cherry on top. And the other part of it, the language duality, if you wish, is that if you have that hat on, you can take it off and you'll be elegant without it. So wear a hat when you have a chance if you're an elegant man. And I'd say this goes for elegant women as well. It's not about gender. Lars just happens to be a man. Number 35, be aware of the politics, no matter what sphere you're in. This is something that I found fascinating in my first talks with Lars, was that he was very aware of the politics in the space he was in. In this case, we were talking the role-playing scene. But it was something that came naturally to him, seeing that this was a factor where it's very easy. It's easy to forget that no matter where you are, there are politics. If you're in the local football club, if you're in a regional government, if you're in a company, if you're in a nonprofit, it doesn't matter. There's going to be politics. There's going to be office politics. There's going to be personal kind of ideological schisms and fights. There's going to be power grabs, no matter where you are, no matter if it seems to be a small place that nobody cares about, there will be politics. Lars was super aware of this when I met him, and I found that awareness is a very good thing to take with you. That even if you're in a place where you think nobody cares about this, well, the people who are there care. Is it the Stamp Collectors Association of a small village? You can bet there are politics at play there. So be aware of the politics, no matter what the sphere is. Number 36, never let your friends doubt that you love your significant other. Now, this is something that a lot of people are really good at, but some are also failing at it. Lars is one of those people who's good at it. I've never been in doubt. He's been with his wife, Maria, I think for half of his life, 25, 26 years, something like that. And even when he said some, I'm not going to call them critical, but made fun of her or something, because that happens as well, I've never been in doubt that he loves her deeply. And the way he talks about her is with respect and with care and with this kind of gentleness and deep feeling, always. And it's not a trick, but it is a skill. So no matter how you talk about your significant other, never let your friends be in doubt that you love that person. Or those people, if there's more than one. I mean, modern times, rainbow families, we can do things however we want them. That's not the point here. Don't let them be in doubt. You can be critical, you can say bad stuff, that's fine, but don't let them be in doubt that you love that person or these people. 37, there are many ways to be a writer. As said, I don't think that Lars has written any books. If he has, I can't remember. He might have, but I don't remember. But still, as said earlier, he's one of the most accomplished writers in his particular niche in the world. He writes blog posts, especially social media posts. He writes for magazines. He writes so much. If you kind of looked at how much writing, high quality writing is done by a person, I don't know where Lars would score, but it would be like in the top 0.01% of the world, even though he does not identify professionally as a writer by trade. Again, unless I forget and he's written 20 books I've just forgotten all about it. I don't think so. But there are many ways to be a writer, and this goes for a lot of professionals as well, that if you are a musician or if you are a dancer or whatever it is you are, there are many ways to approach a career. There's the common ones, the uncommon ones, the rare ones, and the completely off-the-cuff ones. So it doesn't matter what your creative pursuit is. There are many ways to make that come into the world somehow. Number 38. One thing that's obvious when you meet Lars is that many of his friends, they've been around for long. Some of them go back from the early 90s, some of them from the early 2000s. Somebody like me, I've known him for 10 years. I'm one of the newcomers to his circle. I'm one of the young guns. And while I enjoy that feeling, it also says something about the guy. Building long-lasting friendships, that takes work. A lot of work. And if you want to do that, well, of course you don't sit down at age 22 and say, I'd like to be friends with Gerhard when I'm 50, so we better start now. But just remember that these relationships, especially in the modern day and age, they take time and they take effort to cultivate and to keep. They also mean that sometimes you need to forgive others for being idiots. And this goes for Lars himself as well. Nobody is exempt from being an idiot from time to time. If you can't forgive your friends for being idiots, if you can't forgive yourself, if you can't make them forgive you, then those friendships are not going to last those decades. We're all idiots from time to time. It's part of human nature. And this zero tolerance for mistakes that is popping up in more and more communities, it doesn't lead to decades-long friendships, that's for sure. Lars is good at forgiving. Also, sometimes he's an idiot. But that's okay. We forgive him because he forgives us. Number 40, hating surprises. And I can honestly tell you that in Lars's own words, he hates surprises, and he'll probably have a thing to say about this video. But hating surprises doesn't mean you can't deal with them. These are two different things. There's a big difference between not liking to be surprised and being good at actually dealing with that surprise. And that's something that Lars embodies, is that on one hand, he's very, very good at kind of adapting. I've seen him adapt to all sorts of annoying situations, even though he hates it. He hates the unknown and the like, oh, what's going on now, and the insecurity of that, the uncertainty of that. But he's still pretty good at dealing with it. So sometimes when you dislike something, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be bad at dealing with it. 41. Ideology isn't as important as being a decent human. I don't know where Lars is on the political spectrum. I don't know if we basically cast our votes for the same political party or if we're far apart. I know he's not a Nazi or something crazy, but I don't know. Is he a progressive? Well, in some ways, yes, definitely. In others, perhaps not so much. Is he a little bit of a conservative? In some ways, yes. In others, no, not at all. Is he red or blue? Does it make sense to talk about it that way? What I know is that he's a decent human being who I trust with a lot of things. And if it turns out that politically he's on the opposite end of the spectrum compared to me, that doesn't mean I'm going to like him less. Because his decency, to me, is more important than ideology. Number 42, being poor is great training for not being poor anymore. One of Lars's lists, one of his social media posts from years back, was about how he'd gone through various economic phases in his life. And while he right now has a comfortable living, he's got a nice, well-paying job. Him and Maria own a house. I think they got it from maybe her father, something like that. They own a house in a very, very nice place in Denmark. They're comfortable. They're not rich, but they're comfortable. This was not always the case. And Lars and I at some point had a talk about where he said that having had no money, and he also wrote that in this social media post, having had no money is great because you remember that feeling once you have a lot of money or once you have more money, and you can kind of feel the shift and say, oh, this, I used to care about this, what a liter of milk cost or whatever it was, and now I don't. But I recognize that shift, that if you haven't been down, it's very hard to appreciate when you're up. And this is a classic with people who are born into wealth. And I know that I'm born into one of the wealthiest countries on the planet. I'm born into extreme privilege. So all of this that I'm saying here, and Lars is from the same country, so it's also true for him. We're defining ourselves in a very small metric. And because none of us have really been poor, we don't really appreciate what we have, but we've been poor within that frame of being very rich, if that makes sense. So I'm not saying that you should go live barefoot in a desert for half a year to appreciate you have running water. But when you are unfortunate, for whatever reason it is, remember that when things swing the other way. 43, make it very clear how you like to work with others. I've worked with Lars for years on different projects, and he's always been very, very good at saying, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. Here's how you should do it to make me happy. Here's how you should not do it. If you do this, I'll be happy. If you do this, I shall not be happy at all. And that clarity is often a lot more important than if you agree. Because if you know that somebody wants you to be, for example, on time, and that's a super important thing, well, then you can decide. Are you going to stress to be on time, or are you going to say, you know what, I don't agree, so it doesn't matter to me. But knowing makes it so much easier to make that choice, makes it so much easier to prioritize. And one thing that Lars has been exceptionally good at when I've worked with him, and I know this is the case from others as well, is being very clear on how he'd like to work with people. This is something that I take with me into lots of work relations, saying, here's how I'd like you to do things. And sometimes people accept that, sometimes they don't. But most of all, they have the chance to make the choice. 44. You should share both your successes and your failures. If you only share successes, it's easy to come off as a braggart, as somebody who's just insufferably me, 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 me. If you only share failures, sorry for the coughing, not corona. If you only share failures, then it's easy to get a bit disheartened. It's like, okay, this is just depressing and everything is bad all the time. So share both your successes and your failures. I read about both on Lars. Lars is pretty good at sharing and saying, this went badly, or I didn't like this, or this was uncomfortable. But also in saying, yes, we did this, or I did this thing, or I had this great day, or I saw this thing, or the cats. There's a lot about the cats. Cats are lovely. Share both successes and failures. Most of all, share your reflections. If you just say what happened, okay. But if you say what you thought, that gets us interested. And number 46, we're now getting near the end of the line. You can't go wrong with a colorful vest. I mentioned the vest earlier, but just as a standalone tip, you can't go wrong with a colorful vest. I need to get some more colorful vests of my own. 47, Lars has been a role-playing storyteller for all the years I've known him and for most of his life. He's been a writer of some kind or the other for most of his life. But everything he does and everything he's been engaged in has somehow been tied to stories and storytelling. And he is a master storyteller. And one thing that I can see is that it means no matter what he dives into, he takes that storytelling skill with him. And it's a cross-industry, cross-discipline, cross-anything skill that is super useful in many arenas. That's why it's tip number 47. Number 48, a thing that Lars does well. He laughs a lot, and he means it. And you can't really go wrong with that. You can't go wrong with kind of smiling at the world and expressing your mirth. It's just inspiring and energizing. 49, the last tip. I'm pretty sure Lars will hate some of these, but I trust him to like most of them. And that's why I decided to do this anyway. That leads us to the hidden 50. Happy birthday, Lars Chaos Andresen, with much love from here. Thank you.